Brett will probably be back in a minute. Do we want to give it a few minutes before we jump in?
Sure, that's fine.
Great.
Well, good morning to everyone. My name is Cherise Stokes. I'm the partner liaison for Montgomery TechLab, and I want to welcome everyone to our webinar. It's our Q&A about the Defense Accelerator that we have coming up. Montgomery TechLab, located in Montgomery, but certainly working statewide to ensure that we're developing a great tech and innovation ecosystem. We have partnered with TrebleOne for a Defense Accelerator. We just completed our first cohort of the Defense Accelerator back in the August timeframe, and it was an awesome experience that we had, so much that we want to do several more. And so our applications are open right now for our next cohort that will kick off on the 13th of January. And so applications have been open since the 1st of October and they close on the 30th of November. So we wanted to give an opportunity for listeners and for those that are not just in the state of Alabama, but even external, to have an understanding for what that Defense Accelerator is like, to get a good idea for some of the experiences that you would have within the accelerator program. It is an 8-week program, and we have made some adjustments to the program to one be even more attractive to those startups that are looking to break into defense and or may have been in defense a little bit but want even more experience and knowledge. So really fortunate to have Chris Wimmer here, who has worked very tirelessly with us on the first cohort, and certainly as we get into the additional ones, that could give you a great idea of what to expect in that program, but then also available for any questions that you may have about the experience in the program, but also about what you can look forward to and have the opportunity to take advantage of as you continue your journey on doing defense work within the continental U.S. and OCONUS, because a lot of the partners and arrangements and relationships that we all have that we can bring to bear. So I will turn it over to you, Chris, and happy to stay on and answer any questions that you may have.
Great. Thanks, Sharice, and welcome to those who are joining us live and also those who will be looking at this webinar later on. I'm Chris Wimmer. I'll give a little bit background on myself in just a minute, but we also have Brett on the line, who is one of the supporters of this program at TrebleOne and program manager for the Alabama Accelerators. So we're excited to have you with us and those who will be watching later. Just really discuss kind of the importance of emerging startups and innovators within the defense ecosystem. And going to spend some time today talking about how this MTL Defense Accelerator is helping early stage startups and small businesses break through the barriers and enter into really this kind of high impact space and defense. So today the plan is to walk through kind of a regional perspective of, why Montgomery, why is there a defense accelerator program in Montgomery? What's the national and kind of strategic view of defense innovation as it relates to this accelerator and startups? We'll spend some time kind of diving deep into what you can experience, at least through the first few weeks of the program, kind of give a deep dive and a little bit of understanding of what the program looks like. We'll share a little bit of alumni stories and some success metrics that we've seen in this short period of time since we've launched this program, and then close up with some next steps on how you can apply, and absolutely make sure that there's room for Q&A for those who are available with us live. So thanks again for everybody being here. Thanks to Sharice and Alessandra and the MTL Tech Lab for just being incredible partners. Also with the Montgomery Chamber of Commerce, we have great sponsors with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama and Regions Bank, as well as Alabama Power. And so all these great partners, I think, do two things. One, they help showcase how important community is to growing effective programs and startups within an ecosystem. And two, just the level of expertise to be able to help at the granular level of standing up a startup and growing and scaling within this community. So I'm really grateful for our partners. Again, quick background on myself. So, Chris Wimmer, I'm Vice President with TrebleOne, and I'll give some background on TrebleOne in a second. My experience, I have background in venture capital, startup leadership, government business capture, and technology transition and product development. So, when you think of startups that are building from the ground up, I've been in your shoes. I've worked on developing not just the business plans and raising investment, but also building that first product and getting it deployed both commercially as well as in the Department of Defense. So some experience with enterprise software, defensive cyber, AI, space systems, biotech and wearables, advanced materials and human performance. And so really kind of my background as much as well as many of the folks in TrebleOne's team is helping startups and small businesses go and capture, frankly, millions of dollars in government funding, which has also triggered private investment on top of that. So excited to be here. TrebleOne as a whole has been around for about 25 years. And we've worked with over 200 companies. We've helped them secure over $700 million in non-dilutive funding. We've helped transition over 200 technologies to the warfighter. And so when we talk about technology transition, we're talking about taking early stage technology that's in research and development and actually helping shepherd it through to a point where it gets deployed and actually used out in the field by our warfighters. In just the last 3 years alone, we've worked with over 45 companies, helping them capture $165 million in non-dilutive funding with a 74% win rate. We've helped create over 1,400 jobs through these startups and small businesses, which has triggered another $363 million in private capital. So a lot of experience over the last couple of decades working with startups. And I think one of the things that we've really learned over that period of time is, how do we take all this information from working with these startups and working with these small businesses and make it more accessible to early stage companies? And that's what we're doing through this accelerator program in Montgomery. So really excited to be here today. So starting with kind of the regional perspective and why a defense accelerator, why now, why does it make sense to build in Montgomery? And so when we look at, defense innovation as it plays this critical role, both in, regional economic growth, but also national security, it's important to understand kind of the context for why, it makes sense to build a technology startup in Montgomery in the state of Alabama. So when we think of, the intersection of defense, commercial innovation and talent, really Montgomery is one of those kind of rising hubs in the state for dual use and defense technology. A couple kind of things I want to call out from an advantage standpoint to give context to the startups that are watching this today and later on. Montgomery has added over 10,000 new jobs and $1.9 billion in capital investments, which really kind of emphasizes that pro-business climate that you need as a startup to be able to grow. When you look at the need for talent, when you look at the need for capital, Montgomery has that. There's a lot of influence that is happening throughout the state to support innovation. As it relates to the DoD, you have Maxwell Air Force Base. If you're not familiar with that Air Force Base, Gunter Annex. There's within this region, you have 17,000 military and civilian service contractors. There's 34,000 students that can support the growth of tech startups. If you look at data centers, there are 8 data centers. You have program offices that are in charge of buying technology located in the state of Alabama. There are only really kind of 3 states that have these program offices that across the country that have the funds to procure your technology once it gets developed, and Alabama is one of them. You also have a software factory within the Air Force that helps with prototyping and can help with understanding how do you take your software and get it compliant and get it integrated in with larger systems. And so that's a really unique offering within Montgomery in particular. And then I think the other thing, going back to the importance of talent, you have over 135 IT companies, 14,000 workers. So when we talk about mobile technologies and cybersecurity, and we talk about AI, Montgomery really has these kind of regional advantages that you're not going to necessarily find across the country to be able to support and build your startup. And then the last thing I'll just talk about kind of on a statewide level before I get into kind of the broader impact of defense is that, there's the defense sector alone within the state of Alabama is generating $50 billion in economic activity. It's supporting over 265,000 jobs. And when you look at Maxwell Gunter, this region right around Montgomery in particular, it's contributing over $2.6 billion to that economic growth and a lot of jobs that are being developed. So, when we look at it from a startup lens, these assets really help with navigating innovation, helping growing in the defense ecosystem. And that's why TrebleOne's partnering with Montgomery TechLab. That's why we're located here in Alabama. That's why we built an office in Alabama. It's becoming really kind of a nationally recognized playbook, really, for how do you develop an ecosystem to support startups that are growing from the ground up. So that's just some state background. Before I jump into kind of the national strategic viewpoint and kind of bird's eye view of what's going on from a national security standpoint, Alessandra, Charisse, Brett, anything you want to add from the regional or state perspective on why Montgomery is so important to be building startups?
Sorry, I had to find my mute button.
No problem.
Yes, for sure. So as we look at how we're expanding and diversifying the economy in Montgomery, we're certainly looking at the ability to have not only niche businesses, but then also to have a startup community that could very easily help with our mission warfighters. And so as we look at the organizations that Chris just spoke about within the Maxwell Gunner area, we also look at the Air National Guard and the fact that the F-35s, the Red Tails are also flying out of that unit. We have a lot of advanced technology systems that are local to our community. So the ability to have not only startups, to have entrepreneurs, and to have those that are really cutting edge, bleeding edge, leading edge technology and are nimble enough, agile enough to be able to support the technology that's happening, that's important to us. It's also important that we have an opportunity to align some of the valued assets that we have in Montgomery. If it's our internet exchange, if it's some of the other large businesses and mid-tier small businesses that have an opportunity to not only mentor, but to partner and to collaborate with startup entrepreneurs, that helps to attract others like them. And then it's about quality of life. We also look at areas where is that where you want to live? Does that area actually have the things that you're looking for, be it in your educational systems, outdoor recreation, and other areas? We're looking at that complete quality of life. So, yes, not only are we leading from a defense innovation side of the house, but certainly our partnerships and being able to work with national security providers, but then also national security defenders and those that are protecting our nation's security is very important to us.
Trees, appreciate that. Yeah. So if we just so I'll take a minute now to kind of zoom out a little bit and look at the national picture. So if we're looking at kind of the U.S. defense ecosystem, we're really at this critical moment where we're facing a threat from our adversaries around the world, where they are developing weapon systems at a much more rapid pace than the U.S. and in some cases 9 years faster than the United States. And so we're struggling really as a nation to get that innovative tech into the hands of the warfighter. And when we talk about innovative tech in the hands of the warfighter, we're talking about moving beyond prototypes. We're talking about moving beyond research and development and experiments, but actually delivering capability that can scale and that can be used. And so, we're at this point where there's slow adoption of emerging technologies. There's a long, you'll hear this term all the time used, valley of death. That happens between prototyping and actually the Department of Defense buying or procuring your technology. And it's really difficult for commercial innovation and startups to integrate into government systems or integrate into some of these prime systems like what Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman or L3Harris or Honeywell are kind of in charge for taking care of and kind of building. And so that's exactly where, dual use and defense for startups play a pivotal role, right? The reality is breaking into defense is really hard. It's really difficult. You hear that over and over again. And even for really highly innovative companies, you can have some of the best technology out there, the best team, the capital behind you, the private investment, but startups still struggle because the DoD landscape, it's complex and it's opaque. It's really hard to understand kind of where the entry points are and then how to scale within that in that industry. The funding pathways are confusing. They're often slow. There's not a single door into the Pentagon to understand, where the budgets are flowing and where the priorities land. And frankly, customer discovery is even more challenging than commercial markets. You have government customers that are hesitant to show any sort of favoritism to startups, making themselves available. A lot of times, working with new technologies is above and beyond their typical role that they're employed to handle. And so that's why we built this accelerator. It's to help kind of unlock, how to do this business in such a complex industry. So how does the accelerator work? So it's 8 weeks long. In this year, and Sharice and Brett, feel free to jump in, but it's 8 weeks in length, but there'll be 3 weeks in person where you'll have multiple days back to back going through programming. And so during that programming, you'll get a bit of one-on-one coaching from experts at TrebleOne. You'll get some deep engagement with DoD stakeholders. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that means when we go through kind of what did the first few weeks look like. You'll also have access to primes. So the Lockheed Martins, the Northrop Grummans, the Honeywell. You'll meet with defense-specific investors. So private investors that are not just investing in startups, but are investing in specifically in dual use and defense-first startups. And then also operational advisors. So those who have built technology, those who have been on the operational side. And so we really kind of structure, our curriculum in this accelerator around funding pathways, acquisition, dual use strategy, storytelling. How do you make sure you're getting the right message out to the stakeholders that you need to engage with? We'll also talk about tactical and strategic preparation for funding programs like the Small Business Innovation Research program, the follow-on program, something called TACFI and StratFi, which can allow you to get tens of millions of dollars on top of your initial research and development to grow and scale. We'll talk about how you get into pilot with potential Air Force end users and customers and those transition pathways. And so through this whole program, we really hold heavily to our outcomes and success metrics. So when we look at a successful program, we want companies that participate within a 12-month period to be able to win a contract or either as a prime or a sub, a funded contract to run a pilot or establish some partnerships with these primes. And so really kind of our whole goal through this program is to help you founders navigate the DoD with not just clarity and confidence, but also with a compelling value proposition that's aligned to these mission needs. So when you're going into these spaces, how to communicate to the right folks. So with that, I'll take a minute and kind of walk through, what does week 1 through 4 kind of really look like. I'll just kind of cover the first few weeks so you get a sense of what you'll learn and how the structure, how the program's structured. So week 1, we really focus on orientation. We look at Air Force 101. So this is understanding the Air Force organizational structure, introduction to kind of dual use technology and defense technology. We'll guide through some slides and acquisition pathways and how to articulate your value proposition and how that aligns to Air Force priorities. And then we'll also do some planning for what does the next 8-week kind of journey look like and how are we walking you through kind of a foundational understanding of the Air Force and then down into the granular actions that you can take and ultimately ending with kind of a playbook that we'll talk about here in a minute. Week 2, we'll dive into funding pathways. So I mentioned the Small Business Innovation Research pathway as one example, but we'll go into the multiple funding pathways that exist out there and the mechanics around that. We'll talk about how topics are selected. We'll talk about how proposals should be written, how they can be optimized for selection based off the criteria we know that the Air Force uses when assessing these proposals. How to understand matching funds, right? So as a startup, a lot of times you might be looking at raising private investment on top of seeking non-dilutive capital. And so how do you leverage both private and non-dilutive together to show that there's multiple entities with skin in the game and de-risk those investments from both sides. And then in week 2, we'll also spend some time mapping out technologies in Air Force priorities against the National Defense Strategy. Week 3, we'll start to dive into the technical storytelling. So we'll talk about something called an operational view, an OV1. We'll talk about, how do you build this compelling narrative and what are the artifacts, one-pagers, quad charts. There's this lexicon and this language within the Department of Defense that many startups aren't necessarily familiar with that you need to you need to start to understand: technology readiness levels, manufacturing readiness levels. We'll spend week 3 kind of diving into those details and how do you actually start to tell your story. We'll work with you to create these developmental roadmaps that resonate with the DoD and tailoring that technical message for defense stakeholders. And then week 4, we'll talk about stakeholder mapping. So this is: how do you understand the major commands, the numbered Air Force? What are their roles? How are decisions made? We'll dive into the acquisition community, and we'll talk about the S&T community, the science and technology community, the Air Force Research Lab, how you can, what you should be asking them, what they might be asking you, and so when you get in a room, how to talk with these folks. So that's just kind of a quick high level, snapshot of the first few weeks. You're going to hear from, I mentioned, each of these weeks we're going to have panels. You'll have a chance to learn from retired lieutenant colonels and colonels in the Air Force at TrebleOne. Most of the folks on our team have spent 20, 25 years in the Air Force in acquisitions. You'll hear from folks like Charisse and those in the ecosystem that support startup growth. We have Tyler on the call. I saw he just jumped in from Alabama Power. We have great partners in Alabama Power and Regions Bank and Blue Cross Blue Shield, and they have expertise beyond defense that can help you grow your startup in the region. We'll also meet with primes like BAE and Lockheed Martin and L3 Harris and Honeywell. We'll have other startup CTOs sit on panels that have successfully built and deployed their capabilities in the commercial and DoD markets, who have raised funding, have successful exits. We'll meet with the 3 communities I mentioned on the Department of Defense side, right? The science and technology community, groups like the Air Force Research Lab, the acquisition community, the program offices that actually control the budgets and the technologies that are being procured. We'll talk about the operational community, which is the community that are the end users of your technology, the ones that are actually out in the field that will use it day in and day out. And so really kind of collecting this diversity of voices, it's giving you as founders exposure to every layer of the defense ecosystem, from contracting all the way to operations. So I do want to pause there before I jump into the last couple things here to just see if there's any questions from those who are on the call, or anything that Charisse, Brett, or Alessandra might want to add. I don't mind sitting in silence to see if somebody jumps in, but if not, I can certainly move forward. So I'll give it another 10 seconds to see if any questions have popped up from those on the call.
So maybe I can jump in. This is Yusuf. Good to talk to you. Thank you for presentation. I'm just curious in terms of the maybe you mentioned before for networking to the right people in a specific problem that the startup is basically solving. So for example, in our case, we are looking at the mission critical operation, downtime of the devices, battery powered devices. So there are a lot of devices being used in the different segment here. So would be some type of the connection and networking and suggestion to connect to the right people. I mean, how that comes in the whole picture of the program.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So the question is, for a technology, for a startup that has a very particular technology that they're building, what does it look like to connect and network with the people that matter within the Air Force and within the DoD, and how do we do that throughout the accelerator program? So there are a couple ways. One is through an overall education of understanding the organizational chart within the Air Force. Who are the leaders in particular areas that matter to you? We'll also bring panelists that will sit on fireside chats and lunch and learns, where we'll be able to ask questions directly of them and their priorities. And then one of the things that every startup will get at the end of our program is something that we've developed at TrebleOne called Insights, Air Force Insights. And think of it as a business development playbook. It's a 100, 200, 300 page playbook that will be mapped specifically to the Air Force priorities and budgets that align to your technology area. So let's say you're developing a cybersecurity tool. We'll make sure you know exactly who's cares about cybersecurity within the Air Force, what their budgets are, what their priorities are. And so we can hand you this playbook at the end of the accelerator so you can go and start knocking on the right doors and having the conversations with the right folks. And so that's one of our commitments to the startup. So Hopefully that answers your question and adds some context.
Great. Yes, thank you.
Perfect. So one of the things I wanted to kind of call out for those who are thinking about applying, and why, why it's so important, right? I think it's easy for me to, and any of us, TrebleOne or the Montgomery Tech Lab, to sit here and say, hey, we think it's important. This is a great program that we launched, but it's another thing to actually hear it from founders who have gone through the program, and have been successful. And so one of the things we do is we track metrics from the startups and get the raw feedback on what they think about the program, so we can optimize it and build it into something of value, right? Because we don't want to run programming and have people spend time without clear objectives on the back end. And so our programming has gotten really high scores. Specifically, we're seeing that startups are finding a lot of value in understanding the organizational overview of the Air Force, how to market their capability within defense, and network with those ecosystem partners. And so I want to call out a couple kind of success stories in the early days already of Alabama, right? So TrebleOne has been partnering with MTL TechLab and the state of Alabama for the last, really just in the last year, we've been running these programs. And a couple success stories and kind of feedback from these companies. One of the companies in particular, they actually moved down from New York to the state of Alabama. And they felt like, well, traditionally, startups, it might make sense to go to Silicon Valley, Boston, or New York, where they were located. They found much more value in the state of Alabama. They found the government customers in the state of Alabama that they wanted to engage with. They saw the support from the community and at the state level. And so they came and they moved their headquarters down here. And a couple of things they said was that from this program, they didn't understand how massive the DoD landscape was. They knew some of the challenges related to NASA, but they didn't realize that the DoD, the Department of Defense in particular, was orders of magnitude harder to navigate. And so they felt like through this program, we were able to really break down this complexity into digestible chunks, that we started to help them understand the funding pathways and how to navigate kind of this mysterious, ambiguous way of doing business with the Department of Defense. And so what ended up happening actually is, coming out of the program within 6 months, they applied for some funding and they were awarded $1.8 million from the Air Force as a result of going through the program within the 6 months of graduating from our program. And that's triggering another $250,000 from the state in matching funds through the Innovate Alabama Supplemental Grant Program. And so that's one example of a company that came from another state, saw the benefits of Alabama and growing a company in the state, and then was awarded $2 million in an Air Force contract following this program. We have two other companies that have some success stories out of the last Montgomery cohort. We have Generational Systems based in Auburn. They earned top honors on a national pitch competition. They secured $200,000 in prize funding. They also got a $2 million congressional ad to advance their innovation in metal 3D printing. There's a company called GuidePad that went through the last cohort. They were recognized by the U.S. Army's X-Tech program, and they received a funded innovation award. They were also invited to pitch at this exclusive opportunity on a phase 2 SBIR, and they were able to present to Special Operations Command SOCOM as well out of Tampa. And so, when we've kind of engaged with these companies and we've asked, all right, well, what's the feedback that you would give to those who are thinking about participating or those engaging? Some of the feedback they said was, do your homework, right? You have 8 weeks. It goes by fast. But what you invest into this program is going to come back tenfold, right? So the more that you put into the program, the more you're going to get out of it. It sounds simple, but that's coming directly from those who were awarded $2 million 6 months after graduating, right? So we know building a startup is hard work. You got a lot of competing interests, and you have to kind of spread that out. We're asking for that dedication over 8 weeks. We can really help you grow and accelerate if you're bought in. So the last thing I'll just say, and then we'll kind of open it up for questions to close us off here and next steps is, the bottom line is this accelerator, this MTL Defense Accelerator, it's really designed to help you founders access one of the most important and difficult innovation ecosystems in the world. And so if you're building something that can support national security, whether it's mobile, cyber, AI, manufacturing, anything related to defense. This is the opportunity in the type of program that we want you to apply for. And so the application process, Sharice will talk through kind of the dates, I think, to kind of close us out here. But it's a 3-step process. We do an initial screening, and then we go through a technology alignment assessment where we give just kind of homework. It doesn't take a long time, but it helps us understand where you see your technology being positioned within the DoD. And then we do a final interview and kind of talk through if if you're the right fit for the program and if we believe that we can bring a lot of value. So Sharice or Brett, I don't know if you can put the link in the chat here for those who are with us live, but also those who are going to join us later. But I'll pause there. I'll see if there's any questions before we do kind of final acknowledgments and thank yous to everybody and close out. Any last questions?
I think that means
Sharice,
we
Brett,
covered it
anything you have to
all.
add? Yeah, that's a lot.
Uh, I'll echo a couple of things you said, Chris, here in the final moments, and just make a couple of points from observations. Is that the companies that come into the accelerator cohorts do arrive at all different stages of their growth. So don't let that be a deterrent to checking out the program. Again, it's basically a free public education program that is built specifically for your needs. And Chris made a lot of great points about breaking down the complexity of the various communications and relationships you need to have to navigate. And this program does a great job of breaking that down. And like I said, don't worry about the stage you're at. Apply, check it out. And also, it's not just for in-state companies. Chris referenced this as well. Out-of-state companies are especially welcome to join. And it's been very much worth people's time.
Great. Thanks, Brett. Sharice, anything you want to add?
No, I think that was it, and great ads by Brett. I will say that as we enter the next cohort and looking at the structure of the program, ensuring that we can bring value to you. We don't want to waste your time. We completely understand that you're a startup and you've got to prioritize not only your time, but a lot of the tasks that you have to do. So we want to bring value to you. We also want to expose you to a number of the things that you can take advantage of. And if that's resources that you'll have local to the Montgomery community, if that's talent that exists within the colleges and universities that you have the ability to not only partner with, but have access to, but then also just the talent that's local to the area. So I think it's very valuable to at least be exposed to that. And that's something that you may not see at other accelerator programs. But I will tell you that's something that we're very intentional about. And it's the ability to be able to help to bolster your company and for you to have a sustained business, but a growing company in the defense industry. So it's definitely something that we're excited about. Again, just to kind of rehash on a few dates that we have that are coming up. Applications are live and open. You can access that on the website on MontgomeryTechLab.com. Once you submit that application, those are due on the 30th of November. And then that first week of December, we'll start to reach out and contact you about an additional, a one pager that kind of gives us more insight to your company and to schedule you for interviews. Our hopes are that we can quickly go through about 3 rounds to make sure that we have companies that are the right fit. Because again, we don't want to waste your time at all, and certainly don't want to waste ours. But we'd like to ensure that as you go into the holiday, you know what your January and February are going to look like. So we'd like to make all of those selections and determinations just before the holidays so that we can plan accordingly and that we can kick everything off on the 13th of January. And then we finish up the last week in February. So it's a really quick 8 weeks, but it is a packed time with lots of information, lots of value, and lots of knowledge.
Great. Well, thanks, Sharice. And also just want to, again, thank everybody for spending the time with us today and those who'll be watching later. Thanks to our incredible partners that make the accelerator possible, the Montgomery Tech Lab, the Montgomery Area Chamber of Commerce, Innovate Alabama, and then also our sponsors, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Alabama Power, and Regions Bank. This is not possible without the collective support from the entire state and local and regional communities. So just incredibly grateful, and it's been a good first year, and we're excited to kick off this next cohort. So please consider applying, spreading the word, and look forward to reading your application soon.
Thank you all.
All right, thanks. Bye, everybody.